Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everybody, for being here, particularly our friends in the international press. We're excited to have you here to, yet again, show you all how good our elections run in Arizona. As of this date, we are well over what we are estimating is going to be a third of our voters who have already voted early. We're expecting something in the neighborhood, and this is just a guess, about 78% total turnout of our 4.3 million voters. That'll put us at about 3.3 million total turnout. So it looks pretty good. We will have a healthy turnout this year, depending on how things look over the weekend and for the rest through Election Day. Speaking of Election Day, the polls will open at 6 o'clock in the morning across the entire Grand Canyon state. I'd like to remind everyone, Arizona does not participate in daylight savings time. And so when that switch happens this coming Sunday, we will no longer be on what everybody else has got on Pacific time. We will be back to Mountain time. So just imagine when you think of Arizona, we're as cool as the mountains in the wintertime and as warm as the beach in the summertime. And that's how you can keep track of the timing here in Arizona. We also will expect what we have always had in Arizona as far as turnout and announcing of results is concerned. At 7 p.m., the polls will close. Any voters who are in line at 7 p.m. will still be allowed to vote. That will be monitored by marshals at each of our polling places, either precinct polling places or vote centers across the state. When those folks go through the line, then that will be the last person in line at 7 p.m. will be the last person to vote. And our initial results will be announced at 8 p.m., an hour after the polls close. There's something thereafter. Sometimes it takes a couple more minutes than that. We all get very anxious at the 8 o'clock hour. So there are three result buckets. Let's just say they're in three buckets. The first one is going to be at 8 p.m. Those are all of the early votes that are being turned in as we speak and tabulated now before Election Day. Then the tabulation will cease right on or about Election Day in all of our counties. We will announce the results of Election Day periodically through the night after that 8 p.m. announcement. So that's the second bucket. So first bucket is all the early votes that got in early. The second bucket is going to be Election Day results as the evening goes on. And the third bucket will stretch out over several days. This is normal. This is just the way it works. Now, our good friends in the media will make their prognostications and their predictions about who's going to win and who's going to lose when they decide to do that, but those are not official results. And we certainly appreciate all of the great storytelling that's going to happen around this, but official results for Arizona we expect to happen approximately 10 to 13 days after Election Day. Maybe sooner, that would be nice. But we have always had our results right around that time zone. It is not unusual. There's nothing nefarious going on. What ends up happening is a lot of folks turn in their ballots by mail on Election Day. And every single one of those late earlies, is what we call them, has to be hand sorted, signature verified, just like every other early ballot, and then tabulated. That takes some time. We also have a curing period here in Arizona, where if there is a voter who forgets to sign the ballot envelope, if there is a mismatched signature or something else like that that needs to be cured, those ballot envelopes have to be cured before they get tabulated, and in fact, before they get opened up. So that process has to happen too. Now, we all know that there has been some minor adjustments in the Electoral College Reporting Act. We can talk about some of those days. Arizona's counties will canvass their elections. That means they will certify at the county level by November the 22nd. That is their deadline. Some of them might do it beforehand. We're gathering up those lists of schedules now. My office will be certifying the statewide results on November 25th, the Monday of Thanksgiving week. And then we will have the governor eventually issue the certificate of ascertainment for the Electoral College, and the rest of the process will move forward. So that's kind of the timing that we can all expect. Now, if there are any other major issues or questions about process, I'd love to talk about those, but we can talk about just about anything you want until that gentleman tells us that there's time for one or two more questions, because I do have another appointment that I've got to get to, and we'll just go ahead and start.
Can you state your affiliation.
Yeah.
My name is Richard Gatesford. I'm the chief correspondent for Good Morning Britain on ITV.
Oh, Good Morning Britain. Wonderful. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Can you tell us about these extra security measures you've taken and why you've had to take them?
Well, unfortunately, the why is the sad part, and that is because that there are some folks in this country who just can't take a political loss, and they don't believe in each other anymore. The corrosion of the trust we have in one another as Americans is devolving into threats of violence. The reason that we're taking the security measures that we're taking is because we don't want our folks to get hurt. Neither do we want any damage done to our facilities, our people in those facilities, but that doesn't include just our employees. It includes voters and the greater community as well. So we are in this unfortunate posture, but we are taking whatever precautions the folks in that area deem possible, right? We're good at running elections. We're working with law enforcement and other security agencies to take care of the protocols.
And I know you will have tabletop so many different scenarios. What's the worst case scenario you've looked at, and what is it that scares you?
Well, I tell folks we're ready for everything but Godzilla. The thing that does keep me up at night is the fact that we still have elected officials and candidates in this state who are basically believing in lies, and they're continuing to spread the conspiracy theories that mostly originate outside of our country from Russia and Iran and China, those folks who want to deteriorate the confidence that we have in one another. Our foreign adversaries cannot beat us militarily. They cannot beat us economically, but they can divide us one from another. And they're trying real hard. They have allies in the election denialist community, as none of those claims are based in fact. And so that's what keeps me up at night. We are absolutely seeing that. We've been seeing it for a couple of years. It's like that sciatica in your back that just keeps popping up once in a while. You got to deal with it, and we are doing so quite well. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Bisana Quick with Al Jazeera Arabic. Speaking of political violence, 4 years ago, we saw protesters outside of the Maricopa County Tabulation Center in Arizona. Probably was described as like a ground zero for some of these conspiracy theories. You mentioned that it's going to take 10 to 13 days for results to come out. We are already seeing a lot of conspiracy theories being pushed on Twitter from also domestic, not just international figures. What are you planning to do in that maybe that period of the 10, 13 days until the official results come out to counter all of this narrative?
Well, there's two things that could happen. Number one, we could have long enough period of time before most of the projections get made because of very tight margins that could increase the tension. The other thing that could happen is we could have some blowouts in some major races where folks are just saying, okay, there's the winner. It's not close, and folks just move along. That's my hope, that we have wide margins. We always hope for high turnout and wide margins. But if we do have that other space, then we're just going to have to deal with it. Look, we run elections. We run elections well here in Arizona. We've made sure that we've stuck with the fundamentals insofar as administering the elections are concerned. We're going to continue to show folks results as they come in from the counties. In our cumulative space, the counties will be making their own public pronouncements of results. We will continue to be talking with folks like you about what is going on, what the processes are, and continuing to debunk the allegations that we know are going to come up. We have a feeling somebody's going to say something about a mule. Somebody's going to say something about bamboo and paper. That's just the same run-of-the-mill stuff we've heard over and over and over again. And we've seen that those things have proven to be lies over and over and over again. And quite frankly, I think most people are getting kind of sick of this stuff. But we will continue to do our job and do our job well to focus on actually protecting our democracy. Thank you. Yes.
This gentleman here, and then we'll go to...
Okay.
Hi, Wasim Cornet with France 24. You said what keeps you up at night is the possibility that your people, that your team might get hurt. Can you go into specifics about some of those physical safety measures that you've taken to ensure that your team doesn't get hurt?
Well, what keeps me up at night is that there are people still lying about our elections. People get hurt all the time in this space. It's sad that we have to prepare for those possibilities, but we've prepared for those possibilities very, very well, and about as well as we can. So when we do the job of preparing as well as we can, that doesn't keep me up at night. What keeps me up at night is those folks that are still lying about our elections with zero evidence still making the false allegations that they do against good, honorable, hardworking people who have integrity that run our elections at the most local level, here at the state level, and in every other space that we have. So some of these other things that you know, what am I worried about? I'm worried about the safety of our folks all the time. I mean, we've got folks out there driving trucks with supplies around. I'm worried they may get into accidents. You know, we worry about natural disasters. We know a lot of our colleagues in North Carolina specifically have had to deal with some really, really rough space, and they're doing yeoman's work out there. So, insofar as some of the specifics that come from the bad guys, we don't like to imagineer too much of that stuff or talk about it too much. But what we do know is that we've done our level best to prepare as well as possible for those possibilities.
Protecting like the building, the officials in terms of the physical safety measures. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, what we have done in our space, now remember this, and I think this is an important level set to make here. Arizona's elections are bottom up. That means that they are run mostly at the local level. In some states, the Secretary of State actually runs everything. I don't. I am more like a commissioner of a major sports league. We set out the rules, we test the equipment, we make sure that the teams out there have the resources that they need. To that end then, and getting to your point, what we've done is worked with the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency under the Department of Homeland Security. We've worked with the Department of Homeland Security here in the state of Arizona and with local law enforcement agencies to make sure that we've surveyed those physical infrastructures out there across our 15 counties and any of the spaces that we occupy. And after those surveys, made sure that they've got the equipment that they need, that they've got the infrastructure that they need if they've asked for it. Again, our counties are run by independently elected constitutional officers. Those folks have the power over their own budgets. They have the power over their own spaces. So we're here to assist. We're here to make sure that they get the resources that they need. And I think we've done relatively well so far in all of those different spaces. Yes? Lo importante es que si vas a votar temprano, si tienes esa boleta y lo esperas hasta la fecha de elección, esas boletas no van a ser contadas hasta después de la fecha de elección. Si lo entrega antes, en una de las ubicaciones en donde tenemos esas cajas listas o en las urnas en donde otras personas vienen a votar en persona, entonces los oficiales pueden contar cada una de esas boletas antes para que esos números están listos para reportar en martes la fecha de elección. Entonces es muy importante para que no esperemos a esos resultados después de la fecha de elección. And I'll translate that into English for everybody before you do your follow-up, if that's okay. So the question was, why do we want folks to vote early and make sure that they return their ballots before Election Day? The reality is that, as I indicated earlier, if you're not turning in your ballot until Election Day, and that's a ballot by mail, it's got to go through all those verification processes first before we count it, and that's what leads to later results. And that's one of the things that waiting on results can be problematic. If you take those ballots and you turn them in early, either at a drop box or at one of our polling locations, early enough, we can get those tabulated and those results will come out on Election Day. And you had a follow-up.
Yes, la segunda pregunta es en relación, ¿qué tan grave es el problema de las teorías de conspiración alrededor de las elecciones de Arizona?
Bueno, lo grave de la conspiración es que esos tipos de mentiras dan motivación a cierta gente a hacer cosas malas, a amenazar a nuestros oficiales, a potencialmente actuar con violencia en contra de nuestros sistemas, nuestra gente, nuestros edificios. Ese es el problema que tenemos. Esas mentiras, esas conspiraciones son lo que son, mentiras. Y cuando dan energía a gente que van a hacer cosas malas, ese es el problema mayor que tenemos sobre eso.
Dijo que venían de otros países.
La mayoría de estas conspiraciones, el origen de las conspiraciones son de otros países, de Rusia, China e Irán, pero son amplificadas aquí por actuados aquí en los Estados Unidos. Ese es el problema mayor que tenemos aquí ahorita. Back to the top. Okay.
There and then back to
Goodness gracious, you pointed out.
Yeah, so let's just start with.
All right, we'll go back to the top.
Head back 4 years.
Sure.
You had a different role, but some significant experience. Can you explain what that was and the fear it brought to you and your family?
Well, in 2020, so up until and through the election in 2020, I was the Maricopa County Recorder. And I was in charge of the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States of America, right here in the greater Phoenix area. And most of those aspects of the entire election, as I indicated, locally administered. Those protests that we heard about earlier that we saw out there were right outside of our offices, right outside of our warehouse. And we couldn't imagine leading up to the election that those sorts of things were going to happen. So we had to deal with them on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis, moving through the 2020 election cycle and past that. The security protocols that Maricopa County has established since then, because, by the way, I lost my reelection bid on that same ballot in 2020, but you didn't hear me whining about it, right? I believe in the will of the people. After that, Maricopa County decided to employ certain security protocols, and that's determined by the county with any sorts of resource help that we could get them. How did it make me feel? Well, now I feel a lot more prepared, right? Were we worried? You're always cautious about what happens, right? When you get in your car, you put seatbelts on your kids. You make sure that their food doesn't have broken glass in it, right? For us, it's the same type of thing. We are seeing certain sorts of potential problems and potential issues, and we're dealing with them appropriately. This is the way we are approaching what's happening right now. If we allowed fear to get the best of us, then the bad guys would win. And they're not going to make us afraid. They're not going to make us fear. Our democracy and our nation will survive all of this. Yeah. Yeah. White shirt.
Adrian from the newspaper. Could you talk a bit more specifically about the kind of threats that your team and your workers have experienced this cycle?
Without getting into specific instances, what I can say is that we have had, for example, some really threatening types of items left, for example, at folks' houses. We've gotten threats via email, phone call, and on the internet, saying a whole bunch of stuff. Threatening, we had an election official threatened with a lynching here in Arizona. That made some news because it was a party official that actually did that. These are the sorts of threats that we're dealing with. And in some spaces, we're looking at very carefully in some of those dark chat rooms, that are available to the public. We have folks that are paying attention to those sorts of things. And we're using all of the information that we have to make our assessments here in this office. And where appropriate, we're sharing that information with the counties that any of those might pertain to, in coordination with the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, because let me be really clear about these threats. These aren't just threats to and against elections officials. They are acts of domestic terrorism. The definition of terrorism is a threat or an act of violence to make a political end happen. This is domestic terrorism. We are treating it that way, and we are appreciative of the efforts in state, local, and federal law enforcement, including the FBI and the Department of Justice, for their partnership. Yep.
You yourself have also experienced threats, right? And can you talk a bit about what those were?
I have experienced threats, as has my family, but I am not in the habit to discuss the details because I don't want the bad guys to think that they're actually getting to me, because they're not. When we experience threats and we share them with folks personally, as we do with so many of the other folks who experience threats, we will say that an Arizona election official was threatened this way, and then this is how we dealt with it. We're not going to cower, and we're not going to pretend like we're victims here, because we're not. We're charging forward, protecting our democracy. We're going to make sure that our voters are safe, our systems are safe, our people are safe, and that our democracy is safe. Yeah.
Gentlemen on the end, and then we'll go to Al Jazeera. Peter Costantini, Interpress Service Role. Now that the registration period is over, have you seen any evidence that non-citizens, immigrant or not, are registering to vote? And now that the voting has begun, have you seen any evidence that they are voting? And a related question on process, have you observed any problems with the security of dropboxes? Are they susceptible to being stuffed or used to vote illegally?
Well, I'll start with the drop boxes and then go to these other allegations first. Our drop boxes in Arizona, the vast majority of them are monitored pretty tightly. Most of them have, if not all of them, have fire suppression systems inside of them, unlike some of the ones we've seen across the country, I think, but I'm not sure. There's plenty of great, safe ways for folks to vote. And let's not forget There are so many drop boxes across the United States of America and here in Arizona that when we see an instance of something bad happening in one or another, we tend to blow this up into, oh my gosh, there's problems everywhere. These are generally anomalies, and we know that there was an instance with one of our boxes here in Arizona. It had absolutely nothing to do with political motivation or anything like that. So our drop boxes are secure. If folks would rather send them in the mail, that's just as good, although we're past the mail-in deadline, so don't mail them in anymore, or folks can bring them in. Now, as to your question of non-citizen voting, let's just make absolutely sure everybody understands this. Non-citizen voting is at best vanishingly rare. It may happen that somebody who's not eligible will register and may make it through the various sets of screenings that we have set up for that. But this is not an issue. It's not an issue that has or will impact any election, nor has it or will it offset any votes of regular citizens. That is a conspiracy theory and a mythology that is not true. What is true is that Arizona has a higher standard for citizenship verification than any other state in the union. In the rest of the United States of America, all you got to do is sign off an affidavit under penalty of perjury that says you're a citizen, and you can vote every election on your ballot, from president to dog catcher. But in Arizona, the law requires documented proof of citizenship to vote in everything other than federal races. And so we have this higher standard. And what has been bent and misrepresented is that if someone hasn't shown their ID, we haven't verified their citizenship. That's just not true. All it means is that person hasn't met the higher standard and is only eligible for federal races. We have that bifurcated issue here, a bifurcated ballot issue here, I should say, in Arizona. It is unique to us, and I'm very confident that if, in fact, any of those types of things have ever happened, they continue to be vanishingly rare. We see no evidence of any of widespread number, or even in the dozens, if you will, and any issues that we've seen because of that, we will be dealing, because of the data glitch that you may have read about recently, will be dealt with immediately following the election. Now, that having been said, as you know, the Arizona Supreme Court has indicated that the folks that are in a certain set of parameters that have been voting full Arizona ballots for many decades will continue to do so for a variety of reasons. So the Supreme Court of the state of Arizona has given us a reason why they felt the way they did. I encourage you to look that up for any other clarification. Who'd you say was next? Back to Al Jazeera.
So you touched upon this in different ways in your answers, but probably our presence here as an international media is a reflection of how much people outside of the U.S. are interested in this election, and it's a high-stakes election, and we keep on hearing that democracy is on the line, and this is a consequential election. For someone, what's your message to someone overseas, in the Middle East, in countries that probably do not have a vibrant democracy as the U.S.? What's your message to them who probably were bewildered by some of what has been taking place over the past 4 years?
My message to folks across the world regarding Arizona's elections and the elections in the United States of America, particularly as it pertains to the health of our democracy, is this. Our democracy has never been stronger or healthier, and that is evidenced by the champions that we have in all of our political spaces who have come out against the lies, against the conspiracy theories, and against even, in many cases, their own partisans to say exactly what I just said. This is what democracy is about. It's about caring about the voices of your fellow citizens more than the voices of your partisans. And that collective decision-making process is where real power lies and where legitimate power ought to lie. We've evolved past the place and the time as a species on this entire planet where power should be handed down either by heredity or by force of arms. That's not what evolution, our human evolution, has given us. We're showing that right now with the strength of our folks who are out there continuing to vote, continuing to run their elections, continuing to be safe and secure in the face of the kinds of lies and conspiracy theories we've seen. I'm very, very confident in American democracy, and I think the way we have conducted ourselves, not in the very sexy headline way, but as Americans across the United States of America, we're breaking records. Even in one of our fellow states that's a battleground, Georgia, Georgia's had well over 3 million ballots cast in early voting, way more than they had during COVID time. We're seeing huge amounts of people early voting and being excited about this campaign on one side or the other. And we're going to be electing folks for all kinds of offices. So American democracy has never been healthier or stronger because it's never been tested this way as a democratic process. Now, that having been said, you can look back to the Civil War. Outside of that sort of circumstance where people are actually doing that, seceding completely, I think we're doing pretty darn well. Yes.
Estamos viendo que la mayoría de la prensa que está presente son medios internacionales,
Ujú.
están cuestionando la integridad del proceso electoral, las teorías de conspiración internacional. Esta es una conferencia única en su clase que no se había dado antes. Usted con la experiencia que tiene en elecciones, ¿qué significa esto para Arizona? Que tengamos la atención en esas elecciones presidenciales del otro lado del mundo.
Bueno, el razón que tenemos tantos miembros de la prensa internacional aquí es que queremos enfocarnos en otros tiempos en la prensa local. Sí tenemos algunos de la prensa local, como ustedes presente, y sí hay mucho interés en todo el mundo sobre la salud de la democracia aquí en los Estados Unidos, particularmente la situación en Arizona. Lo que significa es que, como yo lo veo, el resto del mundo quiere ver el ejemplo de los Estados Unidos y cómo va a sobrevivir estos momentos. Cómo vamos a sobrevivir lo que nos enfrenta a las dudas, las mentiras, las conspiraciones. Y es importante porque somos una inspiración para el resto del mundo. Somos el modelo de cómo es que un pueblo puede gobernarse su mismo sin tener amenazas, sin tener guerra, sin tener dentro de este país ese tipo de problemas que vemos en todo el resto del mundo o que lo hemos visto. Ahora sí, no somos completamente inocentes, ¿ok? Hemos tenido nuestros problemas, pero creo que lo que está buscando el resto del mundo es el ejemplo. Y aquí en Arizona lo estamos presentando. Tenemos nuestras urnas abiertas, nuestra gente votando, nuestras opiniones se están expresando libremente. Esos son los ingredientes para una democracia que tiene fuerza y que tiene mucha salud. Y así es que vamos a seguir adelante.
Y eso también está revelando la participación de los votantes del Estado.
Claro que sí, ese ejemplo de tener tanta gente ya que ha votado, tienen ese emoción de seguir adelante y participar. Ese es como vamos a enseñar al resto del mundo que este país va a seguir adelante, esta república va a preservar y vamos a proteger nuestra democracia. Muy bien. Yes. Oh. Right back there. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that American democracy has never been this healthy, and yet just a few blocks away, you've got this election center that's essentially been turned into this sort of off-limits fortress that will have SWAT teams on the roof on Tuesday. How do you reconcile that? Because as a non-American, that sounds pretty contradictory.
Well, it's not contradictory. I'll take you to plenty of places around the world where people can't vote at all, or where people vote for very few representatives. In France, by the way, I think you guys vote for 1 or 2 people on your ballot. We've got 78 elections on our Maricopa County ballot. So in my view, we have a much healthier, much more direct democracy. In fact, our citizens in Arizona can propose legislation. We've got 13 pieces of legislation, 2 of which made it by popular demand onto the ballot. And those, if they win, may become law. So while the safety precautions that you're talking about may challenge the image of a healthy democracy, what we see in the process behind the shiny headlines is a lot of people voting, a lot of people excited, record turnout in many parts of the United States of America, and a lot of confidence by the folks who are coming into the profession of administering these elections wide-eyed and ready. They believe that work is good enough and important enough to come into a place where they still have sort of these threats. So I don't think that the presence of extra security measures, just to be precautious, speaks necessarily to the overall health of a democracy. What I think is, will our people's voices be heard? Absolutely. Will their voices be heard accurately and securely? Without question. That to me is what a healthy democracy is about, including the fact that we get to run our own show here in the United States.
Was there someone over here? No. Okay.
How we doing?
Here was definitely waiting.
Okay.
Yes, on a slightly different topic. I noticed on your website that registrations to vote were down, new registrations quite a bit this year. I don't know the percentage. And I was curious about that because it seems strange in an election that's so contested. I would expect them to be up. I wonder, are there demographic reasons as the growth of population slowed or anything like that? Or do you think they're political or social reasons? Why would the number of registrations go down this year?
Well, I would be speculating 100% why registrations might be going down in sheer numbers. But the bottom line is the vast amount of new voter registrations that we get aren't just from people moving here, but in an election year, it's what the parties are focusing on. It's what the activist organizations are focusing on. And perhaps it is that not that much focus was placed in those spaces as in years past. I would be completely speculating, so I just don't have a really solid answer. But voter registration is up, and participation certainly is up as well. Our numbers on the early vote list are also up. So I think we're in a very, very good and healthy place, and I think we are almost done.
We have time for like one or two more questions.
Anything real quick? Anybody want to know what I thought about the World Series? Yeah, go ahead.
How do you feel as an American citizen to see, again, that tabulation center with all these protections? What does it say, you think, about the country to reach to that level? Because, again, Western countries, we don't have that. I know you mentioned some other countries, but Western countries, usually the voting process is peaceful. I know you're absolutely not responsible for all of this. But how does it feel?
Well, I mean, look, if you're an American who's fully aware of history, you're aware that we were born out of revolution, right? We had a civil war. We had to fight for women to be able to get the right to vote. We had to fight across the Edmund Pettus Bridge for some folks to have the right to vote. We've been fighting these demons in this country for a long time. Now, does it upset me that we've got to spend all these resources as against the potential threats of violence? Yeah, it does. But that, in retrospect and looking at it from an historical perspective, it doesn't make me happy, but I still see the participation. I still see the confidence in the folks that are moving this thing forward. We're going to take those common sense precautions, and we are confident. I am confident that this too shall pass. It may take another few election cycles. It may take a couple of decades. But the bottom line is our democracy remains very, very strong. This is a moment in our history that I think we will analyze and discuss a long time. I'd much rather be spending money on voter education than on security, but I don't feel any less confident than I would if there was an open parking lot and folks were just walking in voting. Okay.
We'll just do the last question.
Last one. And I forgot to translate the other one. Sorry to everybody. Yeah.
En español, yendo el día de las elecciones, las casillas abren a las 6, cierran a las 7, se va a esperar hasta que la última persona que llegó informada vote. ¿Qué pasa si para las 8 de la noche que se tienen que publicar los resultados todavía hay gente formada para votar?
Van a poder votar, porque los resultados que se van a reportar a las 8 de la noche solo son para los votantes que entregaron esas boletas antes de la fecha de elección. Todavía tenemos los resultados de toda la gente que van a votar en persona y también los resultados de los que entregan su boleta por correo en persona en la fecha de elección. Esos resultados van a seguir después. Pero si una persona formó en línea antes de las 7 de la noche, van a poder votar y esos resultados se van a reportar esa misma noche.
Igual a las 8 de la noche, sin importar si todavía hay gente formada.
Si están formadas, tienen el derecho, van a votar. ¿Ok? Muy bien.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, sir.
No, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. And special thanks to folks who have traveled or are just kind of stationed here, hanging out, helping your international colleagues. If you need anything else, please contact the office and have a great rest of your time here in Phoenix. Thank you.